When were you tested positive?
I was tested positive on, I think, the 18th of March is when my result came. I gave the test on the 16th.
On the
Yeah,
16th. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
How do you think you might have contracted this virus?
So I'm pretty sure that I had gone for a project to Switzerland on the 1st of March, and I'm pretty sure that I contracted it on the way back, possibly in either on the flight or in transit in Paris airport, because the team that I worked with, other dancers from Switzerland, France, and Australia,
Hmm.
none of them had any symptoms or anything. So it's not from them, or it was not within that crowd, I don't think. And basically, that's who I was with most of the time.
Okay.
And I guess it's after leaving them that somewhere along the way I contracted it.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when you came back to India from Switzerland, were people around you during this meeting were also tested positive?
No, I was the only one who from India who went.
Okay.
When I came back, basically I arrived on the 9th early morning, and from the 9th to the moment that I got tested on the 16th, I did have contact with other dancers and a few other people, and luckily none of them have tested positive. So all my primary contacts plus their contacts, so that would be my secondary contacts,
Okay.
have not been tested, have not had any symptoms or any issues. And in fact, the BBMP and the government, who's doing a great job with tracking and surveillance, actually picked up six of my primary contacts
Okay.
14 days after they met me, and then took them in for testing. And they were all negative, which is something that we are really grateful for.
Okay.
And the reason they took 14 days is because, basically, like, as you know, with this disease, it doesn't mean that if you meet me today, then it shows up today. It can show up on day 14 and sometimes on day 20. So they wait for many days to pass to be
Hmm.
sure, so that it's a foolproof negative test.
When did you
Yeah.
begin to feel the symptoms, and how was your journey from then till you were tested negative?
So I landed, like I said, on the 9th of March in Bangalore airport,
Okay.
and already
So
the
this was
airline
the
as well as
time period. This was the time period when India hadn't undergone lockdown yet, right? So this was the initial stage
no,
of
it was
corona spread in India.
quite a bit quite a bit before lockdown.
Okay.
And basically, when I landed, the airline itself, before
Hmm.
we landed, and then once we landed, the airport authorities made everybody fill up a lot of different forms.
Okay.
Um, the airport authority, of course, they did the temperature test, though that really doesn't mean much with corona because, uh, like in my case, for example, nothing had even manifested yet. um, and even after, I was largely asymptomatic, so even if you temperature tested me in the height of when I had it, you wouldn't have got a fever from, I mean, you would, my body didn't have fever. So but anyway, so after all those, we filled in a lot of forms and stuff. And then I asked the authorities, I remember, that, like, what am I supposed to do? And at that time we didn't have a quarantine protocol either. Like, so later it became that if you land from abroad, you must quarantine for 14 days alone.
Hmm.
But at this time, there was no such information. And in fact, the authority said, no, you go home, and if you have any symptoms, you call the hospital. And there was a notice with this particular helpline number.
Hmm.
So the next day, I stayed home the whole day because I wanted to check what's going on. And I was, of course, jet lagged, but that's kind of normal every time that if I come back east from
Hmm.
the west. And then I called the next 2 days. I did call that number because I wanted to know, what is there a quarantine protocol or whatever. Because I come in Europe, it was already quite big, and people were talking about it more than they were here.
Hmm.
But I couldn't get through to the number. So then I checked with my colleagues, who had gone back to their countries, France, Australia. None of them were quarantining. In fact, some of them had gone back to their kids. They had visited their old parents. So I said, okay, I guess if I have a symptom or something, then I figure it out. Then I anyway on day 3 I decided to go to the doctor and check. So I did go to a doctor, and the doctor was really kind and very careful. So they, when they heard I came from Europe, they did put on their masks. I had a mask on anyway, because I had seen online that if you're going to a hospital, wear a mask to protect the medical.
Was this private institute?
It
Private
was a
medical?
private.
Okay.
Yes, it was a private hospital. But they, yeah. So I went in, and the doctor tested me, and he said, "Well, I guess you stay home and you look after yourself in case you feel sick, and if you feel any symptoms, you come back to the you come back to get checked again, or you call or whatever." And he did try, because he was quite he was being careful, so
Hmm.
he did try to get me tested. But the hospital, when he called the department, they said that no, at the moment India is only testing people who've come in from Iran, Italy, China and Singapore. So you can't get tested, she can't get tested.
The
So then
country wasn't there
uh,
on the list. The country you had
yeah, and
visited.
he gave me exactly, the country wasn't there, and he gave me medication in case I feel fluish or whatever. But that very night, I was, even the tiredness or the jet lag had gone. I didn't feel anything. So I kind of lived normally for the next 2 or 3 days. um, and this is quite controversial, because uh, obviously then later, when I was tested positive, all those people that I met, there was a lot of surveillance and tracking that happened. Luckily for me, because I was so asymptomatic, I think it meant that one didn't cough or sneeze or whatever. So luckily, so far no one has tested positive that I met. Anyway, after that, um, about 4 or 5 days in after coming, I
Hmm.
completely lost my smell and taste,
Okay.
which was very strange, because I didn't have any cold, nothing. Like, normally if your nose is blocked, you lose your smell.
That was the first symptom that was visible to you, very evident to you.
I guess there may have been other things, like maybe the jet lag was not just jet lag, maybe it was
Okay.
tiredness, maybe
Okay.
my I'm a dancer, so I often have muscle soreness. I had
Okay.
even been dancing in Switzerland, and so when I came, it's quite probable, and most of the time we have some kind of muscle soreness in the body. So it's difficult for me to say whether it was muscle fatigue or soreness from COVID, or it was tiredness from COVID, or it was just jet lag and my normal physical work muscle
Hmm.
soreness. But the only identifiable thing was this cold, this lack of smell and taste, which at the time had not emerged as a COVID symptom. So a lot of people now have reported it, and I think governments have even started to say this is a symptom, especially in young people. But at the time, I asked a couple of doctors, and they had said that it's maybe you have a sinus issue, it's unrelated. Maybe you have something, but it's not COVID, because this is not a symptom. But anyway, about 5 6 days later, I started to get a bit alarmed by this lack of smell and taste. So I called the hospital again, and this time I said I'd like to meet the same doctor, because he had seen me right after I had landed. And they said, well, now your country is on the list, because we've added many more countries. So come and get tested. So that's when I went and got tested on the 16th, this was. And on the 18th evening, I got a call from the BMP doctor and medical officer saying, you've tested positive, and there's an ambulance on its way to pick you up. Please tell us your location. Yeah. so so that's how it was.
How did people react to it when they got to know that you were tested positive for corona?
um well, when I got picked up and went to the hospital, the first 4 days they kept me in like an isolation observation space, because it still wasn't confirmed that I was positive. They were suspecting it.
Okay. So there
um
are a lot of
and then,
tests even followed even after you're tested positive, is it?
see, I can't vouch for everyone and every case.
Huh.
Mine, because I was asymptomatic, it must have been
Okay.
confusing for them, and also at the
Okay.
time I think the tests weren't as conclusive.
So yours was a very unique
But
case in the beginning.
no, that also I don't know. I'm saying I
Okay.
don't know. I only
Okay.
can tell you what happened to me, right? Like, I
Okay.
don't know if it. a 60-year-old who's got pneumonia, whether they would put them in observation or straight away start treating them. I'm assuming
Okay.
they would. But
Okay.
I looked completely fine. I looked exactly how I look now. I felt fit. It was just smell and taste.
Hmm.
And my own paranoia that I had even gotten tested the second time. But I mean, gotten to the doctor the second time and got it tested. But anyway, so the next day, I basically, what the minute the call came, the first thing that comes to your mind is, oh my God, who did I meet?
Hmm.
And obviously, you feel this crushing sense of like, oh God, I hope I haven't given it to anyone. And especially to, mainly, I had met very young people, my colleagues who are mostly dancers and are quite fit. But some of them had, met grandparents or who live with family who are older. This was very scary. And then you really kind of um, wonder what damage you've caused. So the first thing I did was I put together a WhatsApp group of all the people that I remembered meeting, but I
Okay.
was also conscious of the fact that some of the people I met may have met other people. I mean, not may have, they definitely have met other people. And what if I've forgotten, like somewhere I've forgotten meeting someone or whatever? So I put it on my Facebook so that people could sort of take precaution, quarantine, stay away from their grandparents, etc. And there was people were very kind in general, especially my community, which is the artist community, and a lot of my friends and family, etc. But then there was a point. The thing is that I'd like to say, like with this disease, we are learning day by day as we go along. So when I came to India, there was no protocol to quarantine. I had no symptoms. So one could have taken 120% safe route and stayed home anyway and locked oneself in. There were days that I did that because those days I was more paranoid. There were days that I felt completely fine. I did go to the doctor. I did ask to get tested. And in fact, it was because I asked to get tested the second time that I got tested. So it's very easy for people to assume that, oh, she was irresponsible and she went off and attended a fundraising event or went for rehearsal or whatever. And that's fine, because when we are challenged in a situation like we are, we need someone to blame. We need someone to pin that hatred, worry, and fear on, and that's okay. But so that happened a little bit. There was this sort of trolling online where they were like, oh, she's a murderer and she should be booked and arrested. And to that, I want to say that I think the government knows its job in terms of who to arrest if they flout the Epidemic Act and they flout. At this point, if someone comes from another country and they go running around or throwing a party, it's a problem, because we know the rules now, we know the protocol. At the time, there was not a protocol. And being in the ward for 20 days, I could see how protocol is developing and changing day to day. And you, me, the prime minister, the president, the scientists are learning about it one after the other, day by day. So it's very easy to say, why didn't you do this? Had I known then what I know now, there's no chance I wouldn't have done it. Of course, I would have done it. But I didn't know, nor did you know. So there's a good chance that if you were in my place, you would have done the same thing. But I do understand where the fear, the paranoia, the name calling comes from. The only reason the problem with that is that it's not useful in this situation, because since then I've been on the phone with a lot of doctors of the BBMP, etc., and because of surveillance and stuff. And so I've spoken to a lot of them, and one of the things they have said is that people aren't really cooperating as much as they would like, and people are also afraid of admitting that they have it or they think they have it. And this is really dangerous, because for example, nobody would have known I had it if I hadn't said it. And what that meant is I could have stayed at home, quarantined, got better, which I probably would have, because my immune system, you know um, thank God, did its job. But I could have met 20 people who were not so fortunate. And if I don't report my positive status, then those people don't get checked, monitored by the government, and something could happen to them. So basically, there was the experience of the virus, which does take a toll on your body, and you have to fight, and you feel that your body is fighting. But you also experience the problem that can be created by us, which is stigma and shaming, and it's not useful at the moment, and actually makes the job of the health workers who are on the field, the government who's doing what it can harder. So yeah, this is what I experienced. Anyway, I tested negative finally, and they kept me for 8 more days. Um, After isolation, where I was then put into a room with another recovered patient. We were both
Can you
tested almost
describe
every.
us the atmosphere in the isolation ward? Like how what was the um, hygiene hygiene protocols taken there, and were doctors equipped with proper equipments and stuff like that? It will be really great if you can give us insight to that.
No, sure. So in the beginning, when I went, I could see that the nurses and ward boys, etc., were protected, but the PPE, or the protective equipment, wasn't as sophisticated as it became a few days later when I went into the actual isolation ward where I was being treated and quarantined. So there, by then, it was really like full on astronaut situation where, like, if they came in, they were really, really protected. They just came for this. You also, every time they came, you wore a mask and you kept yourself uh, far away. In some cases, you turn your face away and talk to them, but you already have a mask, so do they. So they do those stringent measures. They constantly sanitize. There's like a spray that your room, your things, you are constantly sanitized. um, and you're alone. I was in two government facilities, one after the other. The place that I was held in isolation for, after I was you know uh, declared positive conclusively, was great, like really, really clean. I have no complaints about that. I thought, uh, the meals come on time. It's fairly nutritious, staple diet kind of situation. um, and yeah, it's obviously not like the general ward where there's a nurse always lurking around. That's not the case, because they have to keep their distance from you, understandably so, to reduce their exposure, because they're really exposed. 20% of all cases are health workers, so that's something they have to take care of, obviously. Yeah, so that's the situation. I couldn't afford private care, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who can. So if you're someone who's squeamish and you end up getting it and you would rather go to a private hospital, at least in Bangalore, I know that there are many, many units that have been that the government has sanctioned as COVID care hospitals. So you can admit yourself. I was in a government facility, which was perfectly all right.
Where
And
was this government facility? Like
I
which?
was in Jainagar General Hospital.
Jayanagar General Hospital.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did this isolation impact your mental health, and does mental strength affect the road to recovery, and how did it work for you?
See, I like anyone who's been asking me this question, I don't want to. Yeah, I think it. To tell you the truth, I think it really does. If this disease is so related to the immune system, then the best thing we can probably do is to stay really calm and positive and sort of as joyful as we can in spite of the surrounding situation, because I felt it very clearly the days that the stress around me increased. Like if there was this trolling going on, or there was a situation where the house I live in, the landlord, they got a bit paranoid and they didn't want me to come back home. Again, understandably, because people got stressed about it, and this became the COVID house, and people were pointing, and so they felt very ostracized, and they didn't want me to come back. So when that happened, I obviously got very, very stressed out. And those were the days that I was most symptomatic. Those were the days that I would have like terrible headache, or my throat would start to feel vulnerable. I would feel weak or dizzy and things like that. But with the days that I managed to stay calm or meditate, or there were a lot of people sending me good energy. There was a friend who was giving me pranic healing, and whenever those things came together, I felt very strong, and I felt like, okay, this is all right. One can fight this. I'm not saying that that's the case with everyone, but it's clearly better to try and stay calm, not to panic, give your immune system a chance to do its job. Yeah, I clearly felt the disparity between days that I was stressed out and like panicky, and days that I was calm and feeling like
So it's
this is
up and
okay, this
down.
is going
It's
to be
up
okay.
and down.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
The state actually had a psychiatrist calling me to check on me. So there was, those of us in isolation had somebody calling in to check on their mental health and inquiring about how's your family, how are your parents, things like that. And this person actually continued to stay in touch. I can still call her if I suddenly feel unstable. And she and another doctor from the BBMP actually successfully intervened and spoke to the people who own my house, to explain to them that I'm negative and I'm not a threat to them, and that they should allow me to come back. So they really take care of you till the moment that you go back, and even after. One of the things I realized was that, we do have this, like, we feel, oh, Indian government, like, whatever. If you're sort of, I don't know, if you've traveled, or if you think of yourself as belonging or identifying with a certain uh, social or economic class. And I think that this is something that we reflect and we very openly talk about. And fine, it's okay, we have to question our government and our politics, and that's part of being part of a democracy. But I will say, and I don't know about the system, right? Like, there were systemic things that I question. Like, sometimes communication takes long because there are four departments coordinating together. um, but when you're inside it and you realize that they're all on the job, and then you become, say, friendly or familiar with some of the people talking to you, and you start to understand, they'll tell you very candidly. There was a point when they would say, we don't know yet, we are figuring it out, so just cooperate. And what I did realize is, I can't comment too much on the systemic uh, efficiency or non-efficiency or whatever. I came out of it fine, and I'm very grateful that I was treated well and things worked out in my favor. And I hope that everybody who experiences COVID feels the same way at the end. But what I can vouch for is that, in spite of the system or with the system or whatever, the people on the ground, the health workers, the police, the people who are actually calling and doing surveillance and tracking, and the nurses, the doctors, they were incredible. Yeah, the human spirit, for lack of a better word, the human empathy that I saw from uh, all the people that I encountered within the system was incredible. Where, nurses would come and say, "Hi, are you okay?" And then if they saw you were a bit down, they would say, "I'm very sorry that I can't come and spend time with you, but I'm praying for you all the time. Please know that," and things like that. So that made me really quite emotional, and very humble in terms of, yeah, I will do whatever I can to help you, because the service that you are giving at this point to everybody, to humanity, to the country, to the world, is nothing can compare to that. And they know that they have to separate from their families, and some of them are even being evicted from where they live. And so they are facing as much stigma, if not more, than the patients themselves. I have doctor friends who are saying that, like, their friends are kind of keeping a distance, or their neighbors are being a bit strange. And so I don't blame people for acting out in fearful manners. But when you see the opposite of that, like this deep empathy, this sacrifice almost, then I don't know, you just have to say, wow.
do you still have any of the symptoms like weakness or tiredness or something like that even after being recovered?
So I am actually, at the moment, I'm back to physical practice, and I'm teaching class online a little bit, not too much.
Okay.
So I'm feeling physically quite strong in terms of muscles and bones and joints. But I do have every few days a kind of feeling, like when a big wave hits you and you fall down, a kind of a feeling. So it's like the aftermath. Like, I'm not 100%. I think that it's definitely a significant invader in the body. Like, the body is still dealing with what happened to it. The fight that it fought. I can
Okay.
sense that still very clearly. Yeah.
Even after being recovered, do you fear that virus might catch you again? Like, because South Korea has been reporting cases like that.
Yeah, but I mean, every doctor that I spoke to, and a lot of doctors around the world have attested to the fact that they pretty much are able to guarantee that you possibly are immune and won't get it again. But obviously, one has to be careful. The reports from South Korea speak more of reactivation of the virus rather than
Hmm.
reinfection, which possibly means that they didn't really recover.
Okay.
Now in India, I shouldn't say India, but I should say Karnataka or Bangalore, which is
Hmm.
all I can offer because that has been my experience. They are super paranoid. So they kept me in there. The protocol is to have 2 negative tests. I gave a minimum of 3 negative tests.
Wow.
That is throat and nose, which is the official thing. They also did several blood tests during that time, all of which were negative. So 3 plus negative tests later
So
and
they
eight
wanted to
days
be
extra.
200% sure that you have completely
Yeah, yeah,
recovered.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because like I said, they are doing for me, just for me, for one patient, the amount of resource and effort that the government has and the health workers have put in just to surveil and contain and keep track of is crazy. So for them to release me if I'm even a little bit risky to the population would be a huge waste of that effort. So they are being very, very stringent. Yeah, I would say.
Wow. So when once you were tested negative several times, and when doctor said you're good to go back, how did people receive you when you came back?
Well, I haven't seen another human being because once I had this issue with the people whose property I live on, and they live downstairs. But they did calm down, but they didn't meet me. I'm just being very careful not to trigger anyone.
Okay.
So I came home and I came back upstairs, and I informed the BBMP medical officer that I'm okay. They made me keep police numbers on my local area. Police station knows about me. I'm on there, like they are on call with me. So if I have an issue, they have said that there might be some stigma, there might be some issues with neighbors, etc. If you have anything that you feel threatened by, you call and we'll be there within 3 minutes, which I know they will, because that's how it's been so far. It's been super stringent. And I basically stayed away from seeing anyone or meeting anyone, even though I finished my 28-day period from the moment of infection. Um, and I could, for example, if I shared a house with someone, I could have met. I live alone, so that's by default. I don't meet anyone, and I'm careful. Like if I go put the garbage or whatever, I try and go at night very quietly. So I'm also just like staying away from anyone because I don't want to take that risk, since it's a new virus and we still don't know, like you said, these reports of reactivation or whatever. uh, I mean,
That's
I
really
feel okay, and
responsible of you. That's really responsible of you.
I, I don't know, but thanks. Yeah.
Last but not the least, what is the message that you would like to give to our organization and to the people?
I would say that nobody really knows the depth and the scope of this problem that we have now as a global community. uh, in order to contain the problem as one issue, which is the virus. And of course, there are going to be huge fallouts like economic crises, and as we are seeing everywhere, even in some cases political crises. But to not add to that by creating stigma, fear, and panic. Um, I think this is, I mean, an opportunity to act as one, to come together. uh, I witnessed and experienced so much kindness, and which is one spectrum of human behavior, and also accusation, cruelty, stigma, uh, and fear, both of which come from some kind of self-love, I guess. um, and I don't judge it at all, because we're all in this together. So if you're fearful, you're still part of the community I belong to. If you're loving and compassionate, you're still part of that community. I think it's become very clear to me that we are the disease, but we are also the cure.